name is Sam. I'm an elder at Northside. And I'm going to give you the midweek devotion for this week. And it is all based on the sermon that was preached by Pastor Verengerai Maveseri on Sunday, the 17th of July. The passage, the sermon was based on 1 King 18, and it was from the whole chapter. Now, what I've just noticed from this passage, verse 1 says, just give me. Now, after a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. Remember, Elijah had said earlier on that no rain will come on this land except on my word. And at the end of this chapter, in verse 45 and 46, verse 45 says, meanwhile the sky grew black with clouds, the wind rose, a heavy rain started falling, and Ahab rode off to Jezreel. The power of the Lord came on Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. It starts off with a message from God about the rain coming back onto the land. And it ends with the rain actually falling on that land. But in between, there are a number of events that took place for that rain to come. Because the rain was never going to come until the hearts of the people had been turned back to God. Now, let us go through the events then that showed that the hearts of the people had turned back to God. And this is being done by one man, Elijah, who was standing for God. His heart, his spirit were in tune with his God. Elijah clearly demonstrated that standing for God depends on a strong faith in God. That faith gave Elijah boldness to confront the national leader and the nation itself, as well as the false prophets of the land. Now, Elijah knew who Ahab was right from the beginning. He knew that many prophets had actually been killed by Jezebel under the rulership of Ahab. Obadiah, who was the palace administrator, had hidden 100 prophets of God in caves, in 2 caves, to prevent them being killed. Now, knowing all that, Elijah chose to stand for God and confront the king himself. And the king labeled Elijah a troublemaker in Israel. The king may have been referring to the utterance by Elijah that no rain or dew was going to fall on the land except on his word. And God had stopped the rain and dew according to Elijah's word. And in verse 1 of 1 Kings 18, God is saying to Elijah, go back to that land and I want to bring rain into that land. And so Elijah and God were on the same wavelength. Elijah knew his God, and for him to stand for God was just second nature for him. The question is, for you and I, how strong is our faith? Can we boldly say God and us are on the same wavelength? Can we have confidence to stand for God even in the presence of confrontation or opposition, and even being labeled as troublemakers because of our faith? But Elijah's faith was very strong and he was bold. He hit back in verse 18 and he replied, I have not made trouble for Israel, but you, king, and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. He stood for his God, and he pinpointed the root cause of the situation that was facing the land and the king. And that was abandoning the Lord's command and following the Baals. So Elijah also challenged the whole nation and the nations and the prophets, the 450 prophets of Baal. These are the people of God who had turned away from their God. The many prophets of Baal were also misleading the nation. And this midweek devotion is directed at you, the born-again Christian, and also you who call themselves Christians out there. Now, many false prophets have arisen all over the country, Zimbabwe. They are spreading misinformation about who God is, and they are also spreading misinformation about family members, about brother. Now brother and brother are fighting. Now the sons and fathers are no longer talking, no longer in talking terms, and whole families are being torn apart because of false prophets who come and talk in the name of God, but they know nothing about God. There is even a prophet who claimed he had breakfast with God. What heresy! What heresy! Woe to you, prophets. I'm going to read from Mark 13, verse 12. Woe to you, false prophets. This is what is written in the Bible in 2 Timothy 3. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control. They will be brutal, not lovers of the good. They are treacherous, they are rash, they are conceited, they are lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. They have the form of godliness, but denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people. God is warning us to have nothing to do with such false prophets. And Elijah, having chosen to stand for God on his own, he asked the people to choose between the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Israel, or to choose the God of the Baals. And from verse 25 to 38, Elijah demonstrated who the real God was through the burning of the sacrifices. And in the process, Elijah mocked and ridiculed and even rubbished the gods of the Baals because they were false. He showed how inefficient, ineffective, useless they were. He also proved beyond any reasonable doubt that the God he stood for was the only true and powerful God worthy to be honored and praised. And as a result of the demonstration by Elijah, the people turned back to their God. Even the king was persuaded to follow the true God. You and I will never have the opportunity to witness the dramatic demonstrations like Elijah did. But we need to have established strong faith for us to stand for God. The last verses of 1 King 18 from verse 41 to 46, Elijah is now fulfilling the words he had spoken 3 years earlier, that only on his word will the rain and dew return to the land. Elijah was confident that the people were on their side, on God's side, after the demonstration of the burning of the sacrifices by fire. And the people were now convinced, and they were now worshipping the true God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Israel. So at least in the short term, he knew the people were not going to follow the gods of the Baals, because he had eliminated them, even physically. He actually killed them. Now, after Elijah's prayer, rain returned to the land. Now, the takeaway from Elijah's story so far is that we need strong faith, without which we cannot please God. Without faith, we cannot be bold in the face of opposition. Without faith, we will not be able to stand for God. And without faith, we cannot be on the same wavelength with God. Thank you.